Or if I drink coffee while I go?
You can drink all the coffee you want because this is Karen with New Cleveland Radio, and I am here with Mike Skill. So, with a name like that, Mike, you must have a lot of skills,
Good and bad.
good and bad. But I understand the good skills come through music for you, correct?
Yeah, music, art, and yeah, and keeping an open mind and try to keep it fresh.
Well,
You know,
you know what? That open mind is really important in today's society, and especially this past year with the pandemic.
oh,
Um,
totally true.
so let's start from the beginning. What got you into the arts?
Let's see. I grew up in Detroit, and early '60s when I was about yay high, teen. Um, Motown was just coming along. Motown was just happening. Barry Gordy uh, and that and a few years later, the Beatles happened, and mainly, really, it was the second part that I really liked. The Beatles and Stones were great, and it was all good. But when the Kinks hit and the Animals hit, I really liked it. More garagey. It seemed I don't know. I didn't know it at the time, but looking
Right.
back, um, it probably was more accessible. It seemed more accessible. It was a little looser, raw, and um, and in Detroit had a really great music scene. Most of the bands at the time, I was a guy across the street that tried to teach me guitar on a guitar that neither of us could play because the strings were so far from the neck, the the board, uh, the neck, and he was in a band that traveled around. I mean, so there were in neighborhoods there were guys that would leave and go do shows around, and they would play soul music, mostly
Right.
soul music, Ray Charles and James Brown and that kind of stuff. And then when the Beatles thing hit, it flip flopped. It really flip flopped to a rhythm and blues kind of thing, and uh, pop and Motown style. And and so I got a guitar probably the year after I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and Kinks and all that. And the Kinks were great. I just loved just the look was the double breasted suits and Ray Davies was uh, kind of anti-hero look
Right.
and and same thing with Animals. Eric Burden was incredible and that sparked a whole thing. I mean, I always wanted to play piano before that because our family had a piano at another house and we didn't bring it, and that wasn't there. So um, I got a guitar. My brother and I got guitars. I was originally going to get drums because I was really working on drum beats. But when I went to the music store, I think the guy said something like, you're going to have to carry those around," and it got me thinking for a minute that I didn't really want to carry drums
Right.
around.
Exactly.
So, and my brother had a guitar, and I go, "Yeah, that's a pretty good idea." So I got a guitar,
Well,
and
well, you
I didn't
brought up
really do it
something
at that time.
interesting.
I
Yeah.
tried to play it. It was awful to play. Uh, thank you to my parents for getting it, but I waited another year, and my mom got me a better a Gibson guitar about a year and a half later or so. And around that time, that was about 65, 6, a lot of the American bands were happening. You had a lot of the pre, you had the early bands were frat bands, but then they started doing
Right.
the rock and roll blues thing. And then uh, the 13th Floor Elevators came out, the Seeds, the all these American kind of rock psychedelic, pre-psychedelic bands came out, and that really took off for me. The Blues Magoos and all that stuff. So the American rock and roll mixed with the Kinks and the Animals really did it for me. And
Okay.
I really I picked up the guitar again. Um, I think it was like June after school got out. When I was in seventh or eighth grade and eighth or ninth grade and eighth grade and um, I just spent that whole summer learning songs, and I really taught myself.
So
The cool thing in
you and
Detroit
I
was,
have something in common. Okay. So you're from
yeah,
the Detroit area. So am I.
yeah, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. So where did you go to school in the early years?
On the first, on the far east side, I went to Jackson Junior High and then Finney High School, and I was going to go off to art school, but music. I was noodling around with music. And by high school, I met the drummer that started the Romantics with me, Jimmy. We had been after junior high. I went to about ninth grade. I met him, and we just started. He had a band. My band, my little junior high school band, kind of floundered because everyone got girlfriends, and I was still wanted to rehearse, and so I was still just music, and met him, and he went with his band. The guys he was playing with started playing the local church gyms and weekend dance things. The cool thing in Detroit was Notre Dame High School had these concerts, and they're crowded. It was a big gymnasium. They put a cloth on the floor, and we played on the little stage. And on the other stage was like the Frost, who was Dick Wagner, or Bob Seger would play there. Early
Right.
days of Bob Seger, early Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes. God, all the Detroit bands were coming up. And that was really another thing to grab onto,
Sure.
because you had these local bands and you wanted to do what they were doing, and there were outlets to do it. There were clubs all over the place. We had the Hideout on the east side, the Hideout on the west side, and another one. And dance clubs, teen clubs were popping up everywhere. There was so many clubs everywhere. And then we did, I think we had 2 dance shows on Robin Seymour, and on the other channel was another one. I forget what it's called. It was another channel, but so there was a lot of emphasis. They looked like were doors that could be opened or to go through and grab onto it. And I just stuck with it through high school. And we got this little studio, Jimmy and I. A lot of bands, if you started getting pretty good, you rented a little storefront, and you practically lived there. You were there every day of the year. I was there. I was there on Christmas. I was building bass guitar cabinets at one time. I first learned guitar, learned all that. Then as time went on, we needed a bass player, so I played bass. I did that all through high school. After high school, I was off to art school, and music just started taking off a little bit. And right a few years later, we had this one group. It was an early group because Motor City Rockers. We went to one of the girlfriends of the guitar player called CBGB's. We had been reading about the New York scene and LA scene, and things were bubbling in London. We were reading Hit Parader magazine, and it was really cool because in the back you could send your band photo in, and they'd show Max's Kansas City. Cream magazine was around, so you'd see all the bands hanging out at Max's Kansas City and the Starwood and LA and all those clubs in LA. It was kind of like in Hollywood. It was the actors and actresses were starting to hang out with the bands. Right. So the glamour kind of thing came in, glitter thing. One of the guitar player's girlfriends called CBGB's, and we got a show in early days of CBGB's, 73 or 4. We drove there, truck broke down. We had the drums in the back of the truck. Guy came, they brought another truck. We had to transfer. We drove all the way to New York from Detroit, and 660 miles, I guess it was. But went in, played CBGB's. I think we got one room, shared a room, and did the show. That was that. I met some of the Dolls, Sylvain, who just passed away. Great guy, just really nice, beautiful person. And I met him, talked to him for a while, and we hung around for a day or two, and went back to Detroit. And we had been like banging around Detroit. We didn't play really cover bands. We were always writing original music. We were always in our studio, little storefront, writing music. And I had met Wally. Jimmy and I had met Wally at a recording. We were doing a recording session, and he was singing backup or something. I was playing bass, and Jimmy was playing drums. This guy was the lead singer. He wanted us to play on his record, on his tape. We did that, and then we did the New York thing. Came back. We kind of split up for a minute that summer, the end of that summer, and then let's see, that was about 75, 6, 19, and the punk scene had just started bubbling up. So I'm reading a New Musical Express and all those magazines coming out, and I see the photo of the Jam and the look. It took me right back to the Kinks and the Animals thing. And I called Marinos. I called Jimmy and I thought we could do this. This is like we grew up on this, and the Flamin' Groovies had just come out with Shake Some Action, and that was right up the same alley. Dave Edmonds produced it, and and I called Wally. I heard Wally was playing somewhere at a school, and I went saw him play, and I didn't even pay to get in. I just looked through a window or something, and the gymnasium, and I don't know why I didn't go in, but and he was playing, and he looked like he could handle a crowd. It was a kind of a '50s thing he had going.
Sure.
So I went back and I called him and set up a get together. So, and eventually we got together and started working on songs and became a Romantics.
How
We had kind of all had the same view of where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do. It makes it easier when everybody's on the same path.
Sure.
Musically, the look, and with all the outside things that were happening influenced us heavily.
So you've been in the business, if my calculations are right, going back to the 60s, about 50 years.
Yeah.
Um, and, it's interesting because the music has, as you were describing, has changed dramatically over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
I remember in the early 60s, sitting around with my girlfriends and playing 45s. And for those listening, if you don't know what a 45 is, please go Google it so you can see. But we'd put a stack of 45s on there, and we would dream about, being with Frankie Avalon and, Dion and all the performers of the time.
Yeah.
Then by the time I got to college, that music had changed, like you said, because of the British scene. And times just have changed. But how did you really change your music over that time? Because if you grew up wanting to play one way, obviously you had to make changes.
I just kind of followed the flow because with the Motown was really when it first started, it was really kind of '50s doo-wop soul, kind of
Right.
like they moved into their own sound, and so that sound kept growing, kept expanding through the '60s, and then with the Beatles, like "Stop in the Name of Love" is the same as "Help," stop in the name of. It's kind of they were kind of mixing their sounds together. Everyone was influencing everyone else. And on we were getting Canadian radio from Windsor,
Right. Yep.
which is across the river, and one of the largest antennas, the biggest powered station in Middle America, in the Midwest. Uh, they were playing. You would hear James Brown, you would hear the Rolling Stones, you would hear Beatles, you would hear Gladys Knight, you would hear Motown. You were hearing all the black music and the rock and roll coming up. Then you had Bob Seger's. He'd have his 45s, and they'd be playing his early 45s. Bob Seger, Del Shannon was from Michigan. His records were coming up around then. He toured with the Beatles. So I was riding this wave, and I'm just teaching myself in my bedroom, playing all night, banging out these chords, from the Shadows of Night from Chicago, and the Yardbirds. Main thing was Yardbirds and the Who. One of their first shows was at Southfield High School in Detroit, outside of Detroit,
Really?
9 miles outside of
Yep.
Detroit, 10 miles outside of Detroit. They played it was a high school, their graduation or something. I forget what it was. But the Who played the gymnasium, and crazy. So they were on the TV show. My Generation had just come out, and that's the impetus, right? Each thing, it seemed like something was happening well, for sure, every year.
Absolutely. And
So we had a great influence of a lot of different sounds.
and the interesting part is, back then, most of the musicians appeared to be self-taught. It's not like they had gone to music schools. They may have learned how to play an instrument in the band,
Yeah.
in elementary school, but that's not even the instrument that they typically took into the band that, they joined.
Guys before me probably were learning from Elvis, Chuck Berry, and Everly Brothers, or Elvis and Chuck Berry for sure. Chuck Berry was the big guitar player at the time, and then you had guys that backed up Ricky Nelson. I can't think of the guy's name right at the moment, He was on Ricky Nelson show. Um, but they were well. What was the point? The guitar players were influencing me as they came up. So the guys earlier were doing the soul music and that, and I was pulling in from all these the British thing and the American the soul thing, and you had stuff coming out of Los Angeles with the Music Machine, I think, and guys from the Southwest, from Texas. There were guys, you know. I'm going to forget the band right now, but uh, on and on. It just went on and on. It seemed
Sure.
like a new band was coming up all the time. Radio, it was 45s. They played the 45. You go by the 45. I was doing the same thing you guys were doing. We were just pulling we started getting albums became popular
Right, right.
with the Beatles, you know, and Stones. So we were getting 45s, learning the songs on the 45s. And, you know, that's
It was
how I grew up with
a
it. And
totally different time. You didn't have garage band at that time, even though you played in garages. You didn't
yeah,
have the garage band software.
like
That,
you had show bands. You had show bands. They're kind
that-
of like soul bands doing kind of Vegas-y, but not really, really amateurish. But you, as you were saying, self-taught was a thing, and I think that's the same thing now. You got with all the voice and all that. It's kind of we never went through that. No one was trained really
right.
trained. It was all raw on the street corner or at your church or a music studio, and so it was a little more. It was a little more developed. Your personality came out more than you're being trained this perfect singer. Now you have these perfect singers, but there's not much really soul originality. It's
Exactly.
you have songwriting people writing songs for these people. You know, it's not as homemade. It's not as homegrown.
So,
Um,
what are you doing these days now? I mean, you're still performing, you're
yeah,
still writing. So, tell us a little bit about where you are today.
with Romantics, we you know what I like about you talking to your sleep. Luckily, we had a few songs, One in a Million and Rock You Up. 4 or 5 songs people know, and luckily that's carrying us, you know, at this time with the time off because I've been playing. I was out of the band for a year, came back in the band, Romantics, and we played ever since then from the '80s on. We were up till last year. We were playing every year. We're out every year, so it was a really a cut cut the cord. What do you do now? So I had at the time with the drummer Brad Elvis, who was joined the band. It was his band longer than the original drummer, 15 years I think. Uh, he came in the band, and I would started coming up with songs with him, and we were on the road with Little Steven's Underground Garage, and we started writing songs on the bus. So I started accumulating some music. I'd stop off in Chicago. He lives in Chicago, and I'd go in the studio and I'd lay down a song here and there, and I did that over time for the last probably from 2006 up till a few years ago, 2 years ago, and so I had this group of songs, a bunch of songs, and they were mixed and not mastered. And when the pandemic hit, I just decided to start putting out some singles, digital singles, and I sent them over to Chuck Alkazian and outside of Detroit, in Detroit, and at Pearl Sound, and he remixed and pulled them together, and because some of the stuff was I did in my studio, another studio I had that was it was pretty ramshackle. It was cool. It was a really great place, but it was like fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
And he pulled everything together, made it sound really up to date, and I started releasing those songs. So that's what I have now. I've released 67 Riot. It was Detroit Riots. Was in 1967. I was living on the east side, right through our neighborhood. Tanks, jeeps, and machine guns and helicopters overhead, and the news hyping it up, making it worse than it was, I think, in a way, and making people afraid. Detroit changed, and a lot of people just scattered from Detroit and to the suburbs. And I stayed there till the '80s, mid '70s, I think. And my parents moved, and my dad retired and moved. So I was living there, and the Romantics happened. And anyway, that's that part.
Well, you've come a long way, and luckily, we still have your music, being heard. And hopefully, once this pandemic is over, um, and I have to believe it's going to be over
Yeah,
at some point,
sure.
hopefully we'll be able to get you back out on the road. I know that here in Cleveland, they used to do the Moondog Serenade concerts, and they brought in, um, bands from the 50s and 60s. But the last year they did it here in Cleveland, um, they had a hard time getting in bands from the 50s and 60s
Oh, yeah,
because either they had totally disbanded or
yeah.
many of those, performers had passed away. And so it wasn't the same type of concert. And so they sort of gave it up. But there are many of us who still love that music and want to hear it.
I think
Um,
there's kind of an explosion with the doo-wop groups right in the last few years too,
right.
and there's a modern versions of it. So when we
Well,
played the Agora, we played the Agora a lot. We did the morning concerts. Stayed them at like 9 in the morning. We drove at 7 in the morning from Detroit, and we opened for the Talking Heads, and
wow. Yeah.
we played there many times. I did Cheap Trick and Jay Giles, and we cut our teeth before we even were signed. We were playing the Agora and staying over there at the I can't think of the hotel, the Rock and Roll Hotel over there, but
Oh, okay. Okay.
but
Well,
uh,
the whole
but
area.
I released 67 Riot. I worked. I always had in the mid 2000s. I thought even earlier I wanted to do a song regarding the riot because it was just like it happened and it just tore up the city pretty much, and people never came together and really tried to work things out, and it just kind of like just was papered over, and that's why you have things still going on now at this time, and so 67 Riot. Over time, I had the basic guitar track in my old little studio, and my engineer, I told him play a beat. My engineer played the beat. Don't do anything, just play the beat. All I need is on the one, and I laid down the guitar track, and then did the bass and all the guitars. And let's see, I released a song a year and a half ago, I think it was, and I decided to call the producer and people around me working with me. Thought I should call Wayne Kramer from the MC5. I'd mentioned it to him. I'd like to get Wayne Kramer on it, and I was kind of worried about calling him, but I finally called, and he wanted to hear the song, and I sent the song, and he loved the song 67 Riot, and I wanted to do guitar on it, and so I re-released it last year with a 45. I put out a 45. The MC5 were a big group for me in
Sure.
Detroit.
You
Fred
know,
Smith, Wayne Kramer.
did you did you have that sense this past summer with the rioting going on? Okay. Did it take you back to the 60s? Because it did me.
Yeah, I didn't do it because of that. I just
Right.
it, kind of that I released it a year and a half before,
Sure.
and then I got Wayne, and then released that, and then all the other stuff was happening, and so it was always bubbling under, of course, around that stuff. But you know, uh,
So when I listened to the music, my first reaction was, you know, there was all this horrible stuff going on in the 60s. As beautiful as, people wanted the 60s to be.
was
If you went
yeah,
into the inner cities, the inner cities were being destroyed.
mhm,
Um, and what a sadness that was.
yeah,
Now we're trying to rebuild our inner cities. In fact, I was just in Detroit, um, down by Greektown,
sure,
and just couldn't believe, the changes that I
sure.
saw there. But there still is that underlying message that things aren't equal and things aren't right.
I that's something to work on, and I think it looks like it's happening. Younger people, younger folks are more involved than when I was in high school. Well, actually, when I was in junior high, but high school we were protesting Vietnam. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, well, there was a whole change. from 65 on, from art, all the art that we were creating then on the underground, it's everywhere now. And that same influence from Mouse, the artist Mouse, from Grimshaw, Gary Grimshaw in Detroit, from all these rock artists, that whole mod look and that it's come back around, and it's still in our media. So and now it's getting that big boost with with online and internet and stuff.
So you said you went to art school. So you were doing music, but you went to art school.
I was in high school through high school, and then I was on my way to art school, but music
Oh,
was
okay.
taking off. So it was like, whoops, yeah,
Detour.
it
Absolutely.
became more a personal thing.
But you still create art at this point, besides your music. So do you draw? Do you paint, sculpture? What is your art? Tell us.
Yeah, just drawing, painting. A lot of commercial art was what it was called at the time. The same stuff you're seeing on the internet, media art, and multimedia. A lot of that graphics and all that. That was what I was into. The poster art and a lot of that stuff. I still do it, and a little bit. I need to do more of it, but still, my mind is like still the framework of an artist, where I can look at a song and say it needs more dark here, more color here, or that, or my music. There's a music palette in a way,
Yep.
Same thing. And it's really just keeping an open mind and using my roots, the stuff I grew up with, to not take from, be influenced by the attitude and the intensity of it, the energy. The MC5 were a big influence on me. MC5 and early Bob Seger and early Alice Cooper and early Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes, when he was playing songs instead of trying to be Jimi Hendrix. But and anyway,
Well,
that's about it. It's been a long road. I've released 5. So let's see what song. 67 Riot, Dark Side of Your Love. Carrie Got Married was one of the songs last year. Not My Business. My Bad Pretty. They're all available on Spotify. MikeSkill.com on Spotify and Bandcamp and all the ones,
well, we're going to make sure that we,
yeah.
put your website out there so people can
Oh yeah.
find you. Absolutely. So before we close out today, what would you like us to really know about you? Is there something very special about you?
Yikes. Well, what I do is comes from the heart, and being from Detroit, it's really from the ground up. You're really a working class city. I'm in Portland, Oregon. It's a working class city as well. Same thing. It's really a youthful city here, and that's why you see all the energy. There's all this pent up energy and everything. Really young town, and with colleges, universities in town, and it's a jumping off point for a lot of music here, just like in the 60s with Detroit. I think of Portland, Oregon, as it's like a modern Ann Arbor. It's like a big Ann Arbor. It's really like that. Like when I was growing up, a lot of social interest, and that kind of thing, and art wise and music. It's all very creative, from bluegrass up to rock and roll, and we've got it all here, and Detroit's bubbling under as well. So I'm back there a couple times. I'm usually back there 2 or 3 times a year, recording, hanging out, going to clubs, seeing friends, and then back here. But really, I'm just a straight ahead hard rock and roller. I've got a lot of good roots that I've come up with, listening to from the Everly Brothers to Beatles to Neil Young to Bob Dylan. Then you got your Tom Petty's and all that. So it's like a long list of influences, and I still stick to my roots. And I'm not trying to overproduce anything music wise. I try to keep it pretty. Even with digital, I feel that with digital, you have to leave. If you layer stuff that's perfect each track, even on tape, but on digital especially, it's robotic. It gets robotic and it's kind of cold. So if you leave on each track a little bit of looseness, it adds a humanity to it, and I like that. I like the raw, you get the Stooges. I come from there, so it's a lot of different influences, but it's hey, I mean, I listen to John Lee Hooker. I listen to John Lee Hooker and Buddy Guy and all the blues musicians from Chicago that I learned from the Rolling Stones, of course, I
Sure.
learned about. So, someday an acoustic blues record, maybe, I don't know. But right now I've got this stuff coming out. The album, I hope in early spring, hope have the album out, and we can get back out playing clubs and on the road, and in the fall, maybe, if not this year, hopefully, we'll see what happens.
Sounds good. Well, what
And people like you, you're keeping the music alive and keeping the bands going, because some bands won't stay together. Some won't make it through
well,
this.
and we think it's really important, and I can't say this loud enough or strong enough. If you're going to go out and listen to music,
Yeah,
pay for the music.
yeah,
Musicians, I mean, you don't get much when you sell your music, but every penny counts. Uh, you make your money when you're out on the road, when you are doing concerts, and so especially during this pandemic time, we have to support you because we're the ones who need your music.
well, yes, you can't build a good society without good culture.
Absolutely.
You take that away, and you've got pretty ramshackle
Absolutely.
situation.
Well, we look forward to talking to you in the near future, especially once the pandemic, loosens up a little bit, that you guys can get out on the road. We can then go and tell our listeners where you are so that they can come hear you in person because there's nothing like a live performance.
Now you've got some smaller clubs in and around Cleveland now, don't
Yes,
you? Or you did
absolutely.
up until this.
Yes, we do.
Um,
And
yeah,
they're hanging on.
yeah,
What a lot of them have done, they're doing a lot of online performances,
yeah.
uh, in
Okay,
charging for that just to keep
sure.
their overhead. Um, and so we're hoping that that will allow them to open
Nice.
their doors in the near future. So anything we can do to help
Yeah,
musicians out there, because you know what, you turn on your radio when you get in the car because you want to hear the music. You don't want to hear the news.
yeah.
But
That music takes us out of the problems and the situations of the day, and we need that
absolutely.
release.
Well, I'm glad I met another Detroiter out there. Have
Well,
a great day,
good to meet you.
and stay in touch.
Karen, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And please, I'll come back on anytime in the near future. I'll be releasing more songs coming up
That'd be
um,
wonderful.
and get the record out.
Okay. Have a
Thanks so
great
much.
day. Bye bye now.
Be safe.